Talk NFL Draft, Wolf. Let's talk to ESPN NFL Draft expert Mel Kiper Jr., the draft expert, who is joining us on the Arizona Sports Line right now. Mel, thank you so much for the time. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. How you been?
Doing okay, Mel. Really appreciate your time as always, my brother.
Wolf, anytime, man.
Mel, I want to start with your latest mock draft at 16. You have the Cardinals taking a really good corner, Will Johnson out of Michigan. What's your reasoning for that?
Well, he's an anticipatory corner. I mean, he's a pick six waiting to happen. And then, of course, he got hurt this year, injured through the process. End of the year, didn't even play when they upset Ohio State. So the injury affected him a little bit. Obviously, we talk about recovery speed, how important that is. We still don't know that for Will Johnson. But as a player, what he was able to do at Michigan on that national championship team, when he had that great run, and then before he was hurt this year, heck of a corner. Now, the questions that needed to be answered haven't been. That's why some thought beginning of the year, back in August, he could be a top 10 pick, and I have him dropping down just a bit from there. So he's one of those guys that the process still has to play out from a medical standpoint, but when he's healthy, he was a really good corner for Michigan.
Mel, when you look at the Arizona Cardinals and the job that Monty Ossenford has done in terms of drafting over the last two drafts, where do you put the Cardinals? Where do you rank them? Top, middle, bottom? Where do you put them?
Well, I usually don't look back as much. I always try to look forward. But, obviously with the moves they made and the players they brought in to fortify this roster, and you look at some of the guys in their development, yeah, I mean, he's got a good eye for talent. I think when you have to wait and see how some of these guys progress as they move forward through their careers. But for right now, obviously need area-wise, they seem like they've done some things to supplement the roster as well in free agency. And now they just obviously the health of your players, and that's what I say, even for like a Will Johnson, I don't know how he'll be viewed team to team. And medical is going to be important for those guys. We see Jahad Campbell, linebacker, Alabama, with the injury, with the labrum. Now, is he going to be viewed by teams? So medical is so important for a lot of these players that this process now still has to play out for. But to answer the question about Arizona, you look at their roster and you look at some of the guys that seem to be in a position to really take their careers and move it forward. They got a lot of those guys. So, again, we'll see if it comes together. The NFL, the unfortunate part of the NFL is the injury factor, as you know, as well as anybody. So if you can keep your core group of stars healthy, you got a chance. But the depth that they have to build, that's the thing. You look at the backup, the depth that you have to build on an NFL roster is really as important as anything.
We're talking to Mel Kiper Jr. Mel, sort of along those lines, you hear GMs a lot say they don't want to have to draft for need, and the Cardinals have kind of been in that position the last few years, but now they're picking 16th. They have a better roster top to bottom than they have the last couple of years. How much freedom do you think they have at 16 in terms of where they could go position-wise?
I was just looking at that this morning because I was going through all the teams. I certainly did it last week when I was trying to do the mock, and then you see what they've done, the additions they made in free agency, the fact that Tyler Booker didn't run as well as you thought, the guard from Alabama, so pushed him into the second round. You look at the options you have, you look at the defensive tackle spot. Some of these guys are now more in the late first round, a Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, a Kenneth Grant from Michigan, a Darius Alexander from Toledo, even a Derek Harmon. I'm going to Pittsburgh at 21. So after Mason Graham, there's a little bit of a drop-off there. We thought defensive tackle would be a position that was going to be 4 or 5 deep in terms of first-rounders, and most of those guys now are first-rounders, but they're in the bottom half. So this is one of those drafts where I will say this, and I tried to say it on the First Draft podcast today, and when I did the media call today, that it's a lot of mixed opinion on these players. They're all over the place, and we thought it would be, I said, underwhelming back in October. It's gotten a little bit better than that this draft, but there's just so many polarizing prospects that people you talk to, you get your head spinning because you're trying to mock this whole thing out. It makes it very difficult. One of those guys is Shamar Stewart, the defensive end from Texas A&M. Opinions all over the place on him. Even Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado, all kinds of different opinions. So there's two superstars, generational players in this draft. That would be Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. After that, good luck trying to find a consensus on any one player.
All right, you brought it up, Mel. I blame you. You brought up Tyler Booker, okay? Now, listen, Mel, going into the combine, Tyler Booker was going to be a guy that was a guaranteed first-round pick. He was going to go in the top 16 picks a lot of people had. Are you saying the tape does not back up the tape measure, apparently?
Well, what has to happen with him, Wolf, is there has to be the right system, the right scheme, and the right fit. to run like he did, as slow as he did, 10-yard time, 40 time, is going to be pushing him down just a bit. You thought as a player when you watched him, well, he's one of those solid, safe picks. You know what you're getting. Telephone booth guy will just maul you inside. And, the run like he did raises red flags to say, okay, this is against another occupation guys, I call them, the AOGs, and now you're getting into the NFL. As you know, it's a big difference from college to pro, and you're running times like that. We saw Orlando Brown. Remember when he came out of college? He dropped to the third round. He was projected as a mid-first rounder. Now, he's had a heck of a career, but he went in the third round. So Tyler Booker now becomes more of a second-round pick, who at that point becomes a nice choice. But these things do affect because you're still going from college to pro. So these numbers are important. You have to be within a range, and with that's you have to be within a range, guys, when these prospects. And when you're out of that range, you become an outlier. And teams don't like to draft outliers in the first couple rounds. So that's why for an offensive lineman, not as critical depending on the scheme. So obviously that's going to be critical, important, and it's going to determine where he goes. And I think right now, if you had to ask me about Tyler Booker, I would say second round.
Wow.
Talking to Mel Kiper Jr. Mel, I want to ask you about a guy. I know he's not a first-round pick, but he's a big deal around here. Where do you see Cam Scatterbo making an impact in the NFL? Like, does he have to land on the right team, or can he just kind of do this on his own regardless of where he goes?
Yeah, he's, I think, a third, fourth round type of back. There's 31 running backs in this draft with draftable grades. That's the deepest position in this draft in terms of draftable players at one spot. And there's a host of, and there's only two that are going to go in the first, and that would be obviously Ashton Ginty and from Boise State, and Marion Hampton from North Carolina. After that, there's a group bunched together. Caleb Johnson didn't run as well as you needed to be a late first, early to mid second, so he could drop just a bit. If you look at the hot backs right now, are kind of the Ohio State kids, Travion Henderson at Ohio State and Quinshon Judkins, who transferred there from Ole Miss. So there are two guys that have kind of moved up a little bit in terms of the running back position. Scatterbo as well in that third-round mix, fourth-round mix with Dylan Sampson from Tennessee, LaQuint Allen from Syracuse, R.J. Harvey from UCF. So that's that kind of third tier of running backs. It's going to be really interesting to see where those kids come off the board.
So, Mel, that's what I wanted to ask you right there, the deepest position in the draft. So you would say running back is the deepest position in the draft, correct?
Yes, by far. I think the tight end H-back spot's not bad as well.
Okay, so what do you think is the best top end position in the draft? Like, what is the most talent at the top end in the draft?
I'd say if you had to look at that and you say, okay, who are the guys that are going to go in the top 15, top 20 of the first round at what position? Then you would go wide receiver, because that's going to be, I think, that 15 to 20, 23 range. I would probably go, if you look at that, to the defensive line and say more edge, because that's where you're getting guys that are like a Mikel Williams from Georgia. You're getting a Mike Green out of Marshall, a James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, a Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Those guys, I like Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College a lot. I think he's a late one, early two. Femi Oladejo from UCLA, to me, is a very underrated player. Had a great career at Cal, went to UCLA, inside backer, then became an outside backer and really took off. And he's impressive to me as a second rounder. But in terms of the first round, I do think of Mike Green from Marshall. And like I say, Pierce Jr. is polarizing him. Some people think he's a mid-first, some people think he's a second. So I do think you can find some edge rushers in this draft somewhere. Like I say, Mikel Williams is going to go pretty high. He's going to go 10 to 15, in my opinion.
We're talking to Mel Kiper Jr. Mel, is there a player in this draft that you really like that you feel like is just kind of being overlooked or underrated?
That's a good question. I think the guy that's very underrated is LaQuint Allen, running back at Syracuse. I talked about him. He's probably my number one most underrated player. And I think when you look at the defensive backfield, Jonas Sanker is a safety from Virginia. He popped in every game I put on tape. I love Jonas Sanker from Virginia. I think he's a really good football player. He tackles well. He's got good range. I like him as like a third-round draft choice coming out of Virginia. And I mentioned the kids, Oladejo from UCLA and Ezeraku from Boston College. I mean, Ezeraku's got great bend off the edge. He's got really good length for a kid who's only 6'2" and change, 250 pounds. So for a pass rusher in the second round, I really do like him. And I think at the defensive tackle spot, you're going to get some guys. Darius Alexander from Toledo was versatile. He tested well. He had a really good career at Toledo. He's probably a second-round pick. Some think he maybe could get into the late first, but I think he's a little bit underrated because some of those other defensive tackles are going to go a little higher that I think physically and athletically he's as good or better. So I think he's going to be a nice bargain at that point. And I think wide receiver for tight end, the tight end H-back spot. Wide receiver's not as good as it has been, but I do like the two Iowa State kids. Higgins and Knoll are good players, and there's no question. And Savion Williams, another kid out of TCU, Jack Besh from TCU, are really good players. So those two schools are going to produce wide receivers. I think all those four go within the first 3 rounds.
Okay, so the quarterback position, give me your top 3 quarterbacks, and do you think there's going to be a run in the top 10 on those quarterbacks?
Well, I think again, Cam Ward looks like the number 1 pick overall. At least with Adam Schefter was on with me yesterday, he said you can pretty much rate it in pen. So Cam Ward, number 1. We'll see if that holds up. Shedeur, I have going 3. A lot of mixed opinion on Shedeur. Some think he could go 2. Adam was talking about that yesterday. Why not 2 to Cleveland? I had heard mid-first to late-first from some people. So I had a tough time with Shedeur. I struggle with Shedeur. Put him to the Giants. I like the fit. I like the fact that with Eli and Archie, now you go Dion and Shedeur. The bright lights, the big stage he can handle. After that, Jackson Dart I have going to New Orleans at 9. That's a gut feel. Last time they picked a quarterback, the only time was the first round, was 71 with Archie Manning out of Ole Miss. So you go back to Ole Miss with Jackson Dart. You got a new head coach in Kellen Moore, former quarterback. And now he brings in his own guy, and that's important. Bring your own guy. If you love him, you take Jackson Dart. If not, he probably drops to Pittsburgh, and they could probably take him, or the Rams. And then after that is where all bets are off. Tyler Shuck is getting a lot of play right now. Louis Riddick loves Tyler Shuck. I get it. He's 6'5", he can spin it, and he can move. But when you get him in game situations, I see Senior Bowl week and Combine, he was impressive. But at Louisville, I saw some games where when you crowd that pocket a little bit, it wanes. The accuracy wanes a bit. Now, he was 3 years of injuries at Texas Tech. He'll be 26 during the season. So even though Shuck's getting some first-round possibilities and some second-round talk, I'm not as convinced yet. And then Will Howard from Ohio State and Kyle McCord from Syracuse, Jalen Milroe, Alabama, Riley Leonard, Notre Dame. Those are the next tier after that. Some like some of those guys better than others. Jalen Milroe, you thought could have been in the first, second-round discussion, but he was too erratic, too inconsistent. So we'll see where he goes. Will Howard was red hot. Combine workout wasn't great, but we're going to worry about that. He had a heck of a year at Ohio State, and then Kyle McCord went Ohio State to Syracuse and had a heck of a year. But some are a little lukewarm on him. So again, it depends on who teams fall in love with, but there's about 9 to 11 quarterbacks that are going to get drafted within the first 5 rounds, I believe. Okay. And Curtis Rourke would have been one of those guys from Indiana, but he got hurt, and he'll probably get pushed down just a bit.
Mel, pumpkin pie, still your favorite?
It's, I wouldn't say I'm losing a little interest in pumpkin pie. Yeah.
What's your favorite pie right now, Mel?
I would say right now it's a crumb cake.
Oh, Mel, you're getting a crumb cake, okay? We're going to give you that crumb cake, buddy.
Oh, yeah. It's moved over on the big board ahead of pumpkin pie now.
That's huge. It's a riser on the draft board.
Yes, Mel,
it's a riser. Yeah, it's a little underrated, a little under the radar. It's the crumb cake. Yeah, exactly. I use that. And Boston cream pie. I love Boston cream pie, but crumb cake I think would be number 1.
Okay, you know what? You're getting that crumb cake. Mel, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate
you. You guys do a great job. Take care. We'll see you, bud.
Okay, man.
Thanks, Mel. Okay. That's Mel Kiper Jr. joining us right there on the Arizona Sports Line. We were talking off the air before. I told you, Wolf, I was like, this is great because I know in 15 minutes I'm going to be smarter than I am right now after talking to Mel Kiper Jr.
Yes.
And I now feel that way.
Yeah. I'm just blown away. The pumpkin pie is gone.
That's huge.
It's crumb cake. I'm so proud of Mel.
So am I, man. That just made me happy.
Thanks for watching Wolf and Luke. Tap to see more and click the button in the middle to subscribe to Arizona Sports.